Hello everybody, my name is Derby Sale and I am the Citizenship Leadership Coordinator here at State Headquarters, and here with us today we also have...
Hi, I'm Dr. Andy Tolley, the Regional Specialized 4-H Agent in the Northeast, and we're going to be talking to you today about the Awards and Recognition, Scholarship, Award Trips, and Senior Portfolio.
So, starting with what is a portfolio? I'm assuming you have a slightly decent idea if you're hopping on here, but even if not, we wanted to go over that it is essentially a record of your 4-H career. So we're talking about all of your experiences, accomplishments, and specifically the gains, the impact that your 4-H career has had on you.
Now, as you get ready to do your senior portfolio, what you're going to want to do is start gathering some resources. So where do you find these resources? Good question. I'm glad you asked. So past record books are a great place to start. Parents, 4-H club leaders, that's also a great place to start. Old calendars. And then just reflect on what you've done. Just think about it. That might not necessarily be showing up in some of your other reports and record books that you had. And also, what this next bullet talks about, participate in many county districts and states as possible. Yes, you can do that, but at this point, kind of figure out what it is that you'd like to do out of 4-H, and then figure out ways to participate in those things, not necessarily just to see how many you can do, but to see how those things work for you. And the big thing is, write it down, because if it's not written down, I don't even know if it happened.
No, we don't. And you specifically want to understand, too, that you don't have to have been involved in 4-H since you were a Clover Bud in order to successfully do this. Any time that you have spent in 4-H can be documented and put together in such a way that it will make up this portfolio. So don't be intimidated if you have not had as much experience as some others.
Absolutely.
So then we have here our national trips. So you will be able to apply for two different things in the portfolio process. One of those is a national trip and also scholarships. So here we have the two national trips that you can apply for, one being National 4-H Congress and the other being National 4-H Conference.
And National Congress is a really cool leadership event and activity where you go to Atlanta and you meet people from all over, and it's really exciting. And National Conference is actually held you go to Chevy Chase, Maryland at the National 4-H, what's that place called?
Conference Center.
Conference Center in DC, and that's a really cool place to go to learn and see things, and then you get to experience DC. Very different trips, very different things, and these are things, the national trips are what you can apply for as a senior level 4-H'er, whereas the scholarships, you need a graduating senior or in some instances a college student.
So then, as you can see here, we have so many scholarships available.
So many.
Actually, so many that it is over $19,000 in scholarships up for grabs. So if you are not tapping into this portfolio process in some capacity, you are seriously missing out.
And we're really excited this year. I believe they've added a few more, and they're constantly looking for ways to support kids in their college education.
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about the trips. Now, you'll figure out which trip that you prefer. Now, you can only win one trip per year, but if you don't win the trip, or if you win one, then you can apply again in the following year for the unawarded trip, what it says, the one that you haven't received. But it's not a one, and if you don't get it, you don't get to go. You can apply again until you graduate.
Yep.
All right, let's look at the Florida 4-H scholarship conditions. Now, the scholarship conditions talks about how these scholarships will be awarded. Now, you can apply for any and all of them that you are eligible for, but you will only be awarded a maximum of 3. However, if you're the state president and there is a presidential scholarship, then it is not counted towards this cap. So the president could, in theory, win 4 scholarships, but just understand that if they do, that presidential scholarship does not count towards that cap. Now, you only get a year to use this. So when you get to college or wherever it is that you end up going, let the university know so they can, like the last bullet says, that they will pay directly to the school. But if for some reason things happen, life happens, that you're not able to use it within that first year, then you will have to request an extension. And if you do not, and if it's not granted, then you will forfeit the scholarship. Now, one thing I really want to point out about the scholarship is this last bullet, which is really exciting to me, that yes, it's colleges or university, but technical or trade schools as well. So if you're pulling out a scholarship and then you decide, you know, I want to be a fantastic welder and go to this trade school and learn this fantastic skill, that can be used, these scholarships can be used for that.
So now we're actually going to learn about how you apply in the application process.
To get started, download the portfolio and the cover page template so you can see what it is you're going to be applying for and the different things that you're going to need to have. And we're going to go through it in the following slides, but let's just talk about this briefly. Save these on your computer, put them in a place where you can find them, and again, examine the example portfolio for just formatting examples. There's a suggested timeline on this same website page that you can use to try to fill this out stress-free. And then you can get started on your portfolio and get everything done that you need. But after you're done, don't just hit submit. What you want to do is have someone look over this for you so that they can find all these little mistakes or little things that you might have missed or to help you out. I know that when I'm doing something, I like to have a next pair of eyes to look at it. It makes it so much better. Now submit your application between April 1st and June 1st. And when they say June 1st, they mean June 1st. June 2nd is too late.
So we will be diving into these a little further, but to just give you an overall view of what we have going on in the portfolio, you have section 1, which this is your major project summary. So realize very particularly that this is this current year's project. You're focusing in on what you have done this past 2019-2020 4-H year. Then you get into section 2. This is where you can start pulling in anything that has happened during your 4-H experiences. Again, don't be overwhelmed if you have not experienced 4-H for as long as some of your peers. Any time in 4-H is perfectly fine. Then in section 3, we get to experiences in other organizations. Again, this is other organizations outside of 4-H. So just make sure you're delineating between section 2 being 4-H experiences only, section 3 being experiences in any other organizations.
Yeah, and that's really important. I want to re-emphasize that, Derby, that a lot of times people will be doing service in another organization, but they'll end up putting it into that cumulative 4-H experience. And as the reviewers look through it to the score sheet, they will kind of catch those things. That's when we get back to that point of having someone else look over your portfolio to kind of catch some of these things.
Exactly. And then we get into the supplemental materials. So you have your resume, your narrative statement, your reference forms, transcripts, which are only required for scholarships, but they are required for all of them, a financial needs statement, and it's only required by certain scholarships, so make sure to look at that. And then if you are applying for horse scholarships, additional materials may be required.
All right, let's take a look at the senior portfolio cover sheet. And this kind of gives you an idea of what are some of the things that you're going to need to know. Your name, that's a good thing to know. Make sure you put it in here. We can't tell you how many times we may get something up here at the state level that's missing a name. We're like, oh my gosh, this is a great portfolio. I wonder who it is. So let's not forget that part. And then you just kind of go through and figure out what it is that you are applying for. Your national trips, national congress, the different scholarships. And then when we get down to your education level, grade, GPAs, and things like that, test scores, honors, and all those different things. So take a look at this, kind of figure out what this information is, so you'll be able to gather it all up, and then you can just enter it into this particular form. To re-emphasize what Derby was saying earlier, section 1, which is on the left side of my screen here, talks about project goals, current year. Current year. That's important to realize that these are your goals that you wanted to accomplish this year, and then your project accomplishments are related back to those goals, and your activities again are back to the accomplishments and the goals, so they all kind of go together. Now, one thing that Derby's going to talk about here in a little bit or about those goals, that they have to be SMART, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Finally, Section 2 is where we start looking at our cumulative 4-H experience. That means as long as you've been in 4-H, what have you done? Now, some of you, like Derby has emphasized, may not have been in for an extended period of time. Others may have been in for a very long time. So you'll have to determine how you're going to fill this area in your different project accomplishments. And sometimes it all will not fit. So put what you would consider your biggest, most important accomplishments and experiences. And that will carry out throughout the entire process as you go through. If you're running out of space, fill in with what you think are the most important accomplishments. Now, if we look at section 2C, this is when we start talking about your major 4-H activities. Presentations, years and other 4-H events and activities and different involvement. I just want to point out, I didn't on the last slide, but this slide, the L, C, D, S, R, N, I, those are the different levels you could do something. Maybe as an example, you did the local county judging contest, but then you qualified for the state contest, and then you went on to the national contest in a certain judging event. So if you filled it in, it could be local, county, district, state, and national. And then if you went to the international event, so it could be all of those things just for one particular activity or event. And finally, if we look at our other two, D and E, these have to do with your leadership experiences. And I believe Derby's going to cover a little bit more of this. When you're putting something down as a leadership experience, if you put down a club officer, yes, I was club president, but what did you do as club president besides preside over the meetings? The same thing, yes.
And then if you also look here, make sure that you're keeping within the maximum amount of characters. So in each section, it has a maximum amount of characters. So on all these here, you see 4,000 characters, and that includes your letters, your spaces, your dashes, anything that you are typing on that keyboard is considered a character. So you can actually, if you do this in another word processing document, you can highlight those sections and see how many words you have going on. And I would recommend putting it into a separate Word document and saving it as you go, because if you're just relying on the online format, if you get kicked out of that online format, anything that you have done is going to be gone. So if you put it into a separate document and save it there, you're not going to have to stress about if the internet screws up on you.
And that's really good advice there, Derby, because I have worked with youth that have spent a lot of time filling out the online form only to have lightning strike or bad luck, and they lose it all, and they haven't saved their other, and they just have to start over. It's very, very frustrating. But working in that other word processor, it helps with your spell check. It also helps with your saving, and then you can cut and paste into the document.
Yes.
Finally, experiences in other organizations, hobbies, and special interests. It's real important that you list some things here, even if you don't think you have any hobbies or special interests, because if you leave it blank, it'll be scored as a 0. So what is the year, the group, the organization? I was an Eagle Scout. I was a Gold Girl Scout. I was a leader in my church youth group. I was part of the science club in my high school. All these different hobbies and activities. I enjoy cross-country skiing. Enjoy reading books and things like that, or I have my own blog that I like to do and post there with 10,000 followers. So all these different things is where you can list these other experiences and organizations, but this is outside of 4-H.
And again, looking at that bottom, it says skills learned. So yeah, list your hobbies, list your special interests, but specifically point out what skills you have learned from those experiences.
What we have here is the actual rubric that is used to score your portfolio. What really jumps out at me is if you misspelled one word in each section, you will not receive an interview because of the points lost by that one thing. So be very careful as you go through your portfolio. Check with the rubric to make sure that you're answering the questions in the rubric, because as the scorers look through this, they will look at a certain point total and what that means, and then based on what is in your portfolio, they will score it. So it's really important that you kind of go down and figure those things out.
This is not something that's hidden either. This is on the website. You can download this and look at it before you start writing anything so that you have an idea of what is going to be looked for. And then when you send it off for others to look at and review before you actually submit it, send this with it so they can actually score it as they're reading it so that you get an idea of what another judge may be scoring it with.
That's a really good idea there, Derby. Don't just send off your portfolio and say, give me your feedback. Here's my portfolio and here's the rubric by which it's scored. Let me know what you think, and then you can get some really good feedback that way. Other things that people may get tripped up on is when we're looking at the narrative and things of that nature, that sometimes, and that may be in one of our upcoming slides, we'll talk more about the narrative, but sometimes the prompts aren't answered, but we'll talk more about that in an upcoming slide.
So now we have the first section. So we're not going to go through absolutely every single section that's in the portfolio, but we're going to highlight some that will give you an idea of how all other sections can be filled out. But with this first one, submitting at least 2 SMART goals. See that word at least. So you can submit up more than that, but don't give us too many because then you have so much to talk about in a short amount of time. So try to really narrow it down to at least 2, but maybe a little bit more than that. So with SMART, if you've not seen this breakdown before, SMART means specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So I want you to take a second, and if you need to pause this video, feel free to, but I want you to think about a goal that you've had during this past year. And if you did not start out the year with a goal, pause and come up with a goal that meets what you've been doing throughout the year. And as you've now made this goal and you're thinking about it, is it specific enough? Does it give the reader a clear idea of what you are trying to achieve? Then when you're looking at measurable, does it have a certain timeline? Were you achieving it by a certain amount of time? That also goes into time bound later. But you can also say that your goal, instead of just, I want to win the Tropicana 4-H speaking contest, you can specifically say that you want to, Andy, what's a good idea on measuring that?
Winning might be kind of cool, but what you really would prefer to do is to learn better skills to become a better public speaker. So what you'll be working on then is towards those skills that you're trying to do. And maybe it would be that I would like to qualify for the area show, or I would like to qualify and move on with some other things. But you may have another goal, which would be to help other people qualify or do other things as well. So it's not necessarily this is about what I'm trying to do personally. Well, it's all about what you're trying to do personally, but some of your personal stuff that you'll be working on may be more of that leadership role, that I want to recruit more people into our state council, or I want to make sure that we have it. My goal is to have 20 new youth come to camp.
And then when you're looking at achievable, making sure that you are not trying to take over the world in 1 year.
That's true.
That's not possible. So really looking at what is actually achievable and realistic within that 1 year. Then when we look at relevant, like we've said before, there's a difference, and especially in this portfolio, between what you've achieved and done in 4-H and what you've done in other organizations. So this relevance is really going to come down to your project area and your 4-H experience. So if you were a part of the horse program in Florida 4-H, and then you're talking about one of your goals being to
maybe it is to qualify for the state show, or to score a certain number of points, or to try out a new class that you're not used to riding in. So it could be one of those types of things, and it would be time bound. For this section here, it's all about this 4-H year. Time bound is this year within several months or something like that, but the time bound for this section is the current 4-H year.
Exactly. So if you need to pause for a second again and look at the goal that you've written down and work with somebody that's maybe with you listening to this, or write it down and then send it to somebody to look over to make sure that any goal that you put down is within this SMART format, because in judging them in past years, this is the first section that a judge reads. So as a judge, this is the first one that I looked at, and if I automatically did not see goals in a SMART format, that was points off right away. And then that made me look at the rest of it a lot harder, because I was like, well, if they're already missing this right up front, what else are they missing throughout this? What else may not be there? So make sure you start the portfolio off strong with a SMART goal, 2 SMART goals. So then we get into major project accomplishments. So yet again, this is within the current year. And what I wanted to point out here that you can see, and Andy highlighted this a bit earlier, was the designations of local, county, district, state, regional, national, international. So these are letters that you're going to want to make sure that you put in your writing so that it is clear of where this happened at. And it doesn't matter where it's necessarily put at. You can put it at the beginning like it here is here in this example, or you can put it at the end after your whole section, but make sure that you're consistent with it. So don't put it at the beginning in one and then put it at the end in another, or the middle in another. Make sure you're consistent throughout.
Yeah, I like to just reemphasize what Derby just said. That really makes it for the readers to really understand that they see the flow, they see and understand where it's coming from. That consistency is really going to help in the reading of your portfolio.
And then you can see here that it is very specific on what was accomplished. So this person researched and defined equine developmental local areas of need. They trained with a veterinarian to learn how to vaccinate and deworm equine. From there, they compiled the data into a program for further programmatic use. That is a great example of an accomplishment because it gives the reader a clear idea of what they did. It's not simply just, I participated in the horse program. You're putting out there what exactly happened. Now we have moved from section 1, which was focusing on your current 4-H year, to now we're in section 2, focusing on your overall 4-H experience. So you can see here in the example that they say from 2008 to 2015 that they worked in the horse project, and then they go through the exact things that happened during that time frame. So it's really important here that take the different projects that you've worked on, if you worked on multiple ones, and segment it out into these dates. If you have only worked on one project throughout your entire 4-H experience, that's also totally fine, but making sure that you segment it out into the year you started until the current year, or whatever year that you finished that project. So what's really good here, you can see, is that they have shown a progression in their accomplishments. So in 2011, they watched and learned about showing. Then they competed in the show, and then that experience allowed for them to work on their horse's abilities and then get the value up. So that is a great example of how doing something can then turn into accomplishing something. So realize here that we're really focusing on the accomplishments of your project, not simply what you've just done in it.
That's a really good point. And another thing about this section is, in the rest of the sections in section 2A, it's in reverse chronological order. So the most recent ones will go first, and then the next ones and things like that. So if I did the horse project from 2008 to 2015, but then I did a leadership project from, let's say, just 2016 to 2018, the leadership project in the listing would go first, and then the horse project would be second. So that's just a little detail, but think reverse chronological order as you're filling this out.
And then you also want to make sure if you've submitted in the past, if you are copying and pasting from previous years, you want to make sure that you're updating certain dates as well. So if in this horse project, they were to add that in 2020, their value went up even further, and then on the dates, they only put 2008 to 2018, that starts to provide confusion for that judge as well, because there's dates in the description that aren't actually in the header. So realizing those things as well and looking at those little things. Again, that can be something that is really helped by having other people look over it. So then we're still in section 2, and we get to our offices and leadership experience. This is super, super important to remember that we want to see what you accomplished as part of your role, as part of your office, as part of your leadership experience. So in this example, we've read these sometimes, that people simply put that they were a county council reporter. Now I recognize that there is an election process that you go through and you run for the reporter position, and that is an accomplishment to get that. But in this portfolio sense, we want to see what you actually accomplished as part of this role. So even as an example, I'll say that it's not even the best that it could be, because you're talking about promoting 4-H in local news outlets. Well, tell us how many news articles you put out there. Tell us what outlets were used. And then saying published a monthly newsletter. Okay, how many was that during your time frame? So putting numbers to that. If you're talking about chairing a committee, what committee
did you chair?
Exactly, what did you chair? And what did that committee accomplish? So simply chairing a committee is cool, but if you didn't actually accomplish anything as part of that committee, then that's not as important here. So tell us what that is. And I would say upholding general officer duties, you can include that, but again, I would shy away from that just because you really want to think about what you actually did as part of that role.
And another really good example I like to use is sometimes that a role or an office, say vice president, that does have a very important committee attached to it, but if you just put in your portfolio 2012, 2013 county council vice president, I wouldn't know as the grader, well, that person's actually in charge of our service project and we collected 10,000 pounds of trash in a local beach cleanup and we're able to save 400 green turtles by removing all this trash. We wouldn't know that simply by knowing that you were that particular office, because the vice president, you take over the roles when the president's not there, but in your particular instance, in this role, you chaired this committee and you did all these cool things.
Yes, and everybody's perception of what a position is different. So what you may do as president is maybe not what my experiences or Andy's experiences have been as a president ourselves or working with presidents. So realizing the judges are coming in with different perspectives and experiences. So
yes,
laying clear things out for them is going to make your portfolio a lot stronger.
You know, in some instances, the county council president's actually a person on the advisory committee. So that's all these roles that are rolled up into the title. Tell us about them. All right, on to the resume. The resume has two different parts to it. We got the formatting, and then we have what's actually included in the content of the resume. So when you look at your format, 1 to 2 pages, 1 page is strongly preferred, but if you do 2, it's okay. But if you're going to do that second page, make sure that you make it a little bit longer, not just 1 line on the second page, but add a few extras. And when it says 10 to 12 point black font, they really mean 10 to 12 point black font. I know there are lots of really cool fonts out there and really cool colors and things that you can add. Think this is not the time for that. You want a business style format, and there are other programs or applications that can help you do your resume. But make sure that when you save them for uploading that it's in these particular formats. That way when we get them here at the state, we'll be able to open them. Now, what to include as part of your resume? First, you have an objective. It's what did you want to accomplish by receiving this particular scholarship or trip or things like that. Yes, we know that you're applying for this, but you need to have an objective. I would like by winning the scholarship, I might be able to pay for all my books my first semester in college, things like that. Your skills and accomplishment, think about what you've done through 4-H that can then be applied to a job. Teamwork, public speaking, all these things that would make somebody, hey, hire me. Education, if you haven't already received your diploma, or if you have, you put the date when you expect to graduate. However, some people may have taken college classes and they're actually going to have an AA type of degree in addition to their diploma. Those things go here. This is also where you can talk about academic honors and things of that nature. Finally, employment. If you've had an employment, make sure you list the name, date, employment, and all these things, and then a bulleted description of your responsibilities. Now, don't forget that some people also do some independent things. They do some babysitting, you do some pet walking and things like that. Think about these particular opportunities that you may have had and how that you can use this as part of your resume.
So certain things to consider are focusing on your skills, things that you have gained, not just simple tasks that you did as part of the job. What are you bringing to the workplace? What makes you stick out from others? What makes you special? And remember that this is a professional resume, so write it for a potential new job. Make sure that from a perspective of a reader or a judge that it's easy to read. Again, this goes back to sending it to other people. It may look really good to you, But somebody else that may look at a lot of resumes every day and hire people can pick out some things that'll make it easier to read. And then really understanding that less is more. Be as concise as possible. Andy mentioned it on the last slide that 2 pages is allowed, but are you fully putting things into that second page? Or can you be a little bit more concise and fit it onto 1 page? So looking at that as well.
The narrative statement. 2 to 3 pages. This is starting to sound really familiar. 10 to 12 point font, double spaced, PDF, DOC, DOX. It's really important that you follow these guidelines. Now, there's one thing that we really want to remember about our narrative is that you actually have prompts that you will need to be talking about and to answer within your narrative. Have you benefited from 4-H? What skills have you learned? Make sure that you answer the prompts. People turn in some wonderful essays that don't really address some of these questions that are asked. And where are the prompts found? They're found on the website. So you can look at what those would be. What I prefer to do, you cut and paste the prompts, put them on your sheet, answer them all, and then you write it into your overall 2 to 3 page narrative. Again, as you want to read through the narrative, you want this to provide the reader that story about 4-H and what it is and how it's developed you.
Now on to your references. So reference number 1, regardless of who you are, what you do, is going to be somebody within your county 4-H extension program. If you have an agent in place, it'll be that agent. But if you're in a county that only has program assistants for the time being, or that's just the structure of your program, then it can be any staff or faculty that works with the 4-H program. Then your reference number 2 is going to be an adult that knows you well. So really thinking about someone that understands what it is that you are looking to accomplish, what your experiences have been. And it's a good idea too to actually send your references this portfolio so that they can actually speak to what you are writing and that it can look like it's all overall cohesive portfolio. So references will automatically receive an email notification with instructions and a link to complete an online reference form. So this is not going to be something that they send separately. It'll be an online form that they fill out. Make sure that you select your references before you apply so that you make sure that they are willing to complete the reference for you. The worst thing that you can do is not tell somebody, they get it, they don't do it, and then you're getting penalized for that through your score and your rubric. So making sure you're letting that person know that they are going to be a reference so that they can be on the lookout for that as well. And then making sure you're following up with your references. So we are not going to send multiple emails over and over again to get the reference from who you suggest. It is your responsibility as the submitter to make sure that the references get in what they need to get in. And the deadline, no matter what, for everything is June 1st. So if you know your references right off the front, you can submit those right away so that they already have the email. They can already be filling it out. Because again, if they don't fill it out by June 1st, then that's going to be penalized within your overall score.
What I think is really interesting about this last line here is as soon as you know who they are, you can submit it even before you've actually uploaded your portfolio. There's no need to wait on this. Contact your folks, say, hey, I'm doing this, would you like to? Go on ahead and submit it.
Exactly. So again, this transcripts and financial needs statement. The transcripts are only needed for scholarships. So if you're applying for a national trip, we don't need a transcript. But any scholarship you're applying for does need a transcript. So again, make sure you're uploading them as a PDF, doc, or DOCX, because that is what's going to be read best and most universal that people can open. Transcripts can be unofficial, so you don't need to order them from your school, pay for them, anything like that. They can be unofficial, figuring out however that you can get those from your school. And then a financial needs statement is only required for scholarships based on financial need. And that's only a few within the overall scholarships available. And then you will be prompted to give that financial needs statement within the online application portal. And there's an example on the website that we'll provide in the description below that you can go to put that together.
circling back around to transcripts, that's another one of those things that you're going to want to go ahead and ask for, because sometimes your high school or college or something has lead time that they need to collect these things and give them out to you. Sometimes it's just available online really easy. Other times, you ask on Monday, but we're not going to give it to you till Thursday or Friday, but the due date's Tuesday, so you're not going to have it in time. So going ahead and start getting these things together.
So similar to previous years, we are a completely online submission process. So we are actually through Qualtrics. So making sure that you have everything ready beforehand. If you go through this presentation that we've done for you tonight, you can go through every single part of it, and even the downloads online. You can go through everything and have everything ready before you even get to the online system. So doing that will help a lot, so that once you're actually there, you can do it in a timely format, because again, if you get kicked out of the system for whatever reason, it all goes away, and you have to do it in one sitting. So hints for success, again, typing it all in Word, copy and paste in an online portfolio, making sure you're keeping within the submission window, April 1st at 9 a.m. to June 1st, 4 p.m. That 4 p.m. is a hard deadline. The system shuts off at that point in time. You're not going to be able to call anybody and get it open back up. June 1st, 4 p.m. Realize for anybody that is in Central Time, this is 4 p.m. in Eastern Time. And then references will be emailed, and the reference form will be submitted online. So again, those references need to be submitted beforehand. If you submit it at 3:59 on June 1st, your portfolio, and that's when you're submitting your references aren't going to have enough time. They're not going to be able to get the email and do everything within 1 minute. So realize you need to submit your references beforehand. And make sure you give valid email addresses for those references as well. Sometimes we do catch that, and we will try to be as helpful as possible, but it is not our responsibility to find the correct email address and get in touch with the person. This is a screenshot of the Qualtrics page, what you'll be seeing when you submit, so that we just wanted to make sure that the first time you saw it was not when you're submitting. This is what you should be looking at.
Okay, just some reminders to kind of go over. Some counties may have their own deadlines. Be aware of the county deadline. Again, Word, PDF, that seems to be a theme that's running through all this. Approval to submit these particular forms and everything if they're required. If you have other additional, again, there's that PDF, DOC, DOC, make sure it's in the right format. Make sure that nothing was cut off when you put it in. Like Derby was saying, there are word counts that if you put too many words in there, it's just going to stop. And sometimes when you cut and paste, you might miss a word here or a word there. And when you paste it in, you might not be able to see it. So double check that. Keep a copy of this. It's really cool once you've compiled all this, because all this work that you've done can then be used for other applications. It makes your life easier in the future. And again, the follow-up with your references.
So once you submit, whether that is April 1st because you're super on top of it, in the middle because you've been working on it, or right at June 1st because you got busy and you still wanted to make sure that you got it in there. But now what happens after you've submitted?
All right, the decision process is actually a two-step process. The first step, you've submitted your portfolio. That's step one. Step two is being able to come to that interview. So in order to come to the interview, that's done at 4-H University, unless it's a horse scholarship, then it may be done at a different time. But the interviews will be done, but you have to score a 90 or above on that score sheet, the rubric that we've shown you. Once these have been scored, notification will be sent out that, hey, you've been invited for an interview. So you will be notified. And once you go to the interview, you're not going to have multiple interviews. If you apply for 10 scholarships, it won't be 10 different interviews. You will interview once for the scholarships and then once for the award trips. So the most interviews you would have would be a total of 2, one for trips, one for scholarships.
And realize too that you do not have to participate in all of 4-H University in order to do the interview. You can simply just come for that interview process.
Okay, the decision process continued. Qualifying for trips and scholarships. you have to have a combined average of 90 on both the portfolio and the interview. So if you have the interview, then you've already got the 90 on the portfolio. Now you got to get the 90 or better on the interview. So what they'll do, the state office will rank all the scores together, and the scholarships will be awarded based on rank. The most scholarships you can win would be 3. Unless you're the president, then you can win the presidential scholarship. That's not included in that total. The recipients, if you win, will be notified and recognized at the banquet at 4-H University.
And again, you do not have to attend all of 4-H University in order to come to this banquet. So thank you all for joining us as we have gone over this entire portfolio process. We would like to particularly thank Sarah Hensley, the State Specialized Agent for Curriculum and Evaluation, as well as Courtney Query, the State Events Coordinator. Even though they could not grace us with their voices for this presentation, they were extremely helpful in putting together the presentation as a whole. So this is Derby.
And this is Andy.
Thank you very much.